Hello, today is day 434, the war that is seemingly lasting forever, and is there an end in sight? Once again, this is Fayelle Ewuakye alongside Reverend Dr. Mae Elise, and these are her notes. The Associated Press news on the latest in the Middle East this morning began Israeli strikes in Gaza kill more than 50 people, including kids, and wounding dozens more. Friends, this is not a video game where you shoot people and blood comes out, but they don't really die. People, dozens of people, continue to die every day. Please engage in any way you can. If you need help in knowing what to do, reach out to us at Churches for Middle East Peace, and you can find more information on that in the notes. The ongoing death and suffering is ethnically cleansing the Palestinian people, and every day the atrocities continue. Peace and security for Israelis and Jews around the world moves further away on the horizon. Today, the humanitarian snapshot number 8 came out. CMEP is a contributor alongside dozens of international humanitarian aid agencies that are the real heroes in Gaza and the region. This is their summary of the situation. Now, in mid-December 2024, Israel's offensive in Gaza has killed more than 44,800 Palestinians and injured more than 110,000, while more than 10,000 are reported missing and likely buried under the rubble. The October 7th, 2023 attack by Hamas killed some 1,200 people, mostly civilians, and around 250 others were taken hostage. Some 100 hostages are still inside Gaza, at least a third of whom are believed to be dead. Approximately 80% of Gaza's territory remains under forced displacement orders by Israeli forces, with 1.9 million people, or 90% of the total population, having been internally displaced multiple times during the past year. Palestinians in Gaza are facing the combined effects of a lack of critical resources, collapse of public order, and worsening weather conditions. Without adequate humanitarian assistance, Gaza has become unfit for human survival, says Joyce Msuya, the acting UN Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, told the UN Security Council in November. An average of only 65 humanitarian trucks per day entered Gaza in November, well below the 500 humanitarian truckloads per working day allowed before October 7th, 2023, which were already insufficient to meet the needs of the people. In the same period, commercial supplies have come to a near halt. Attacks on aid workers have continued. On November 30th alone, 3 separate Israeli airstrikes killed a Palestinian soup kitchen chef, feeding hundreds of families in the besieged Beit Lahia. 1 saved the children's staff member and 3 staff from World Central Kitchen, pushing the latter to pause its operations altogether. The total confirmed death toll among humanitarian workers since October 7th, 2023 now stands at 343. As acute food insecurity and desperation spread across Gaza, UN and humanitarian organizations continue to experience looting of aid convoys, including by armed gangs in central and southern Gaza. In some cases, unarmed individuals seize supplies during unloading or transit to distribution points. As a result of the breakdown of public order, including in areas where there is a heavy presence of Israeli forces, on the 1st of December, UNRWA announced that it was suspending aid deliveries through Kerem Shalom, the main crossing point for humanitarian aid into Gaza. According to media reports, on December 12th, Israeli forces reportedly targeted a security team escorting aid trucks, killing at least 12 and injuring dozens. Meanwhile, heavy rains hit the Gaza Strip on November 25th, marking the start of the winter season. The worsening weather conditions are expected to affect more than 1.6 million people living in makeshift shelters, including 500,000 in flood-prone areas. In August, OSHA developed a comprehensive winterization plan targeting 2.1 million people and requiring $242 million, but its implementation is being slowed by a lack of sufficient funding and a lack of facilitation by the Israeli authorities to ensure the entry of supplies and equipment. In Israel, there are some scary political maneuvers taking place within Netanyahu's war cabinet. Israel's security cabinet made the decision that, in effect, could ban any international NGOs that call for boycott or any activities that delegitimize Israel. Basically, NGOs that are saying Israel is deliberately withholding aid as a weapon of war could mean international development agencies operating in Gaza and the occupied territories could be banned, losing their ability to operate, get permits, and carry out their critical missions. The announcement indicated this was to not allow permissions and approvals for registrations of organizations that could be harming the state of Israel. Israel-Hamas war. Sullivan yesterday said he aims to close a hostage release and ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas this month. It feels like we've been hearing such promises for 400 days. I hope he does secure a deal that will end the killing and the violence. I really do. The U.S. response to the Israel-Hamas war, President-elect Trump did not recommit to pursuing a two-state solution in the Israel-Palestine conflict in an interview published yesterday, saying there are numerous ways peace can be done. Moving on to Syria, Russia is in direct contact with Hayat Tahrir al-Sham's, the main body who led the resistance, also known as HTS. Russia is in touch with their political committee and aims to maintain 2 military bases in Syria. HTS yesterday offered to cooperate directly with the United States in searching for American journalist Austin Teese, who has been missing since 2012. Israel will stay in Syria until an effective force that meets Israel's security demands is established, the government said yesterday. Meanwhile, Defense Minister Israel Katz has instructed Israeli troops to be prepared to stay in the buffer zone through the winter. The Iranian government is facing fierce and extraordinary public backlash over the resources it spent on propping up the Assad regime. U.S. response to Syria includes a federal grand jury in Los Angeles, California yesterday charged a former Syrian government official with torturing political dissidents at the Adra prison in Damascus. Secretary of State Antony Blinken yesterday said his Jordan and Turkey trip aims to unite the region behind a peaceful transition to a new Syrian government. White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan yesterday defended Israel's actions in Syria, saying it has a right to defend itself from risks to its security, and that the United States has every expectation to move into the buffer zone, that its move into the buffer zone would be temporary. Just a reminder that Israel this past week has carried out the worst strikes in Syria in the nation's history. Meanwhile, the international community responds. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said he is deeply concerned about extensive violations of Syria's sovereignty and territorial integrity following Israeli attacks on the country since the Assad regime's collapse. France's foreign ministry yesterday said it is too soon for the European Union to consider lifting sanctions on Syria, and that discussions in Brussels will focus on developing a position on the country's transition. G7 members will meet virtually today to discuss the situation in Syria ahead of a planned weekend summit in Jordan with foreign ministers from Arab and Western states. About 1.1 million people have been displaced since the start of the rebel offensive in Syria, according to the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OSHA. Today, Palestinian Christian Tony Diak shared his Advent devotion through Red Letter Christians. Tony's wife is not Palestinian, so they must live in South America in order to be able to be together, since she is unable to get a permit. Tony's messages today challenged us about how it is incongruous to allow for a racist ideology promoting ethnic cleansing and the ethnocentric support of violent settlement enterprise while also seeking to proclaim the good news of the gospel. He says if God's love and goodness are to be proclaimed to the world, then the removal of Christian Zionism is an imperative. May our hearts and minds and actions be increasingly filled by the love of God every day for all people. Amen.